Welcome to the 2018 19 Top Careers Industry Trends. Today we're going to be going through trends that were discovered, uncovered, and shared by our career thought leaders as they joined together in our annual Career Jam event, and also as they've shared their insights throughout that event and throughout the year at some of our other events. We've gathered all of their input and put that together. So what you're going to see is the high-level trends that we're seeing in the careers industry. And we'll talk a little bit about how those have implications for yourself as a careers industry professional, if you're a coach, a resume writer, career service provider in any setting, and how they have implications for clients, job seekers, those who are looking to advance within their company, and a little bit is in terms of entrepreneurs. So we're going to be going through all of these trends, and again, welcome your thoughts and your input. This is Marie Zimenoff, CEO of Career Thought Leaders, and Career Thought Leaders is a global organization on a mission to advance and professionalize the careers industry. We have individuals worldwide that are participating in our events, in our trainings, in our networking events. Over the 2017 year, we had more than 1,000 people participate in our events from 37 different countries. So we have folks, career service providers from all different settings, whether that's in a workforce center, a college, community college, university, independent, corporate. All of us come together and share ideas so that we can move the industry forward and make sure that we're all on top of the trends for our clients so that they can have the best information that they need to be successful. Today, again, we're going to cover the 2018 trends in the industry. Those have kind of fallen into 4 different categories. Personal branding, and personal branding is taken on many different meanings in the common media, but we talk about it in terms of how you communicate who you are. So knowing who you are is developing your personal brand, and then communicating who you are is personal branding, in person, online, and in career marketing documents. We're also going to go through some trends in career management, so how people make sure that they have a plan and are managing their career longevity in the dynamic workplace. We're going to talk about that dynamic workplace, how the landscape of employment and workforce expectations are changing. And we're going to talk about talent management, how companies are adapting in their hiring, screening, and talent management processes. Important to realize that most of this data and information comes from the careers industry side. We do have some recruiters and hiring folks that attend our events and share their insights, but a lot of what we're sharing is what clients are seeing and how they are experiencing the hiring, screening, and talent management practices. So first, we're going to start with these personal branding and career communications trends. Personal branding. Personal branding has infiltrated pretty much all conversation in the careers industry, talking about it in leadership development, leadership, being a good leader, career advancement, and of course in job search. And as it's permeated all of these different areas of a person's life, this discussion about who you are and how you communicate who you are, it's become more and more important that this is a real, authentic, and transparent delivery of who you are. So you may see common articles about personal branding talking about how it's spin or it's fake. That's not personal branding. And in fact, as communication has become flatter, people don't like hierarchical conversation. They don't like that professional front that some of our clients might be used to putting up. More tools are evolving to make sure that we're real, authentic, and transparent. You think about the rise of video, you think about the rise of real-time video, and you think about the transition of video from those produced pieces, even at the corporate level, to a more authentic, real, maybe unproduced, if you will. That is where the whole of communication is going. And I hear this from recruiters, from job seekers, from leaders, that no matter what role they're in, it's being demanded of them from those who they are trying to communicate with, that they are communicating in a more authentic way, and that they're more transparent about who they are, and that they're more able to weave together the personal and professional aspects of their life without going overboard and sharing too much information about themselves, but making sure that they are a person to those folks that they're doing business with, leading, or wanting to be hired by, or wanting to hire if they're on that recruiter's seat. Online communication has gone visual, and if you are not going visual with it, pretty much no matter how you're trying to communicate, you're not getting your message through. Visual communication has that power in our brain, this 600,000 times faster. It's processed in our brain faster than text. And so no matter what your client is trying to communicate, if they're not doing it visually, they're going to have a hard time getting their message across. And especially in the busyness of social media, they're going to have a hard time getting attention, getting those likes and shares and comments, and really having a connection with their audience if they're not mixing in some visual content. Career marketing, so there's always this conversation, and I think we've been doing this event for 8 years where we get the careers industry together and talk about what's going on. And almost every year there's a discussion about, is it still necessary to have a resume? Do you have a resume? Of course, we're talking about LinkedIn and profiles and all of those things, but the one piece that keeps coming up is, yes, you still need a resume. For most positions, for most companies, at some point, you will need a resume. Even if they see your LinkedIn profile first, which of course is becoming more common, you will need an actual document at some point in the process most of the time. Now, is this true for those high-tech folks? They might be hired straight off of LinkedIn, maybe a smaller company or a real, Gen Z young type of company, sure. But for most of us, most of our clients, they still need to have a resume. And of course, we know that the value behind the process of putting together a resume or LinkedIn profile is the real value for all of us, for our clients, for us, in defining who we are, putting that down on paper, and being able to tell those stories, which is another important piece of our career communications. That resume needs to be able to go through applicant tracking systems. I would say that that's the one area I see the most misinformation going out around the careers industry, is about applicant tracking systems. What does having a tech-savvy modern document really mean? We've got a YouTube video up on our YouTube channel that goes through some of that. I've got some links on LinkedIn about that. If you're getting applicant tracking information from someone who's not up to speed, it usually is making your resumes look outdated. You don't need to have an outdated design to go through an applicant tracking system anymore. So that's one of the areas that our thought leaders talked about, really needing to make sure we're all sharing the updated information, and we're looking out for that updated information if we're going to give input to candidates on what a tech-savvy or applicant tracking system-friendly document actually looks like. Our social brand, so what we do online, and this is true no matter how much of an online presence we think we have or don't have, because 69% of hiring managers are using a Google search, some kind of search engine. They're not going necessarily to a specific social media. Even if your client doesn't think they have a presence, they do, or they have a lack thereof, which can be just as detrimental to their career, to their career advancement, to their job search. Numbers from 2017, 70% of hiring managers are using social media to screen candidates, and 45% have decided not to hire, both those numbers coming from a Career Builder study in 2017. Each year, whatever we're doing on social media becomes more important, and tying that back to our first conversation around social, or around personal branding in general. This isn't just about having that polished professional image. In fact, that can be a turnoff to a lot of people you're going to do business with, hiring managers, people who you're going to lead. They want a social media presence that is somewhat balanced in showing them who you are, what your interests are outside of work, and of course that workplace, which becomes a hard balance for our clients. How do you build a social brand that does all of that, that weaves together all of those pieces in their brand? And our Reach Personal Branding class really goes through how to help a client build that social brand in a thoughtful way. I know those of you who are working in the university environments struggle with helping young people kind of clean up their image. And those of us who work with boomers, or maybe those who are more seasoned in the workplace, struggle with helping them understand that it's okay to post some of those personal things, some of their interests, some of their professional, if you will, pieces that help them become more personal to those that they're hiring and make that connection. Personal branding, social branding, really all about making that emotional connection with the person that is our decision maker. And if we're not including some of the who we are beyond as a professional in all of our branding, all of our career communications, then we're going to struggle in making that emotional connection and really having people remember who we are and feel compelled to continue the conversation with us. Brand communications. Storytelling's been around for a while. It started in the marketing world and has moved quite squarely into the careers industry. Our clients struggle with this too. On a resume, we're starting to get it, right? It's been around in a resume for a while to have that challenge, action, result kind of story. You are doing it professionally, most of the time without any personal pronouns, right? But you were telling a story about the accomplishments, the value that your client brings in that resume, in that career communication, and we're comfortable with it there. And we're starting to get comfortable with it on social media, where it looks different, it feels different, it sounds different, it's more accessible, it's a one-on-one conversation, it's a story, it's not a resume. And many clients, and in fact a lot of the career professionals that I work with who are trying to get more into writing LinkedIn profiles, are struggling with this as well. How do we tell the story in social media in a way that connects and is still professional, especially on LinkedIn, but isn't the same as a resume, that tells that story in a different way, that gives our client life and accessibility? And the term professional, PER, professional, that Deb Dib, one of our CTL board members, uses frequently, is really that idea of how do you help people blend the personal and professional. Interesting thing is that this idea of storytelling is somewhat spilling back into the resume and challenging us to make our stories on the resume even a little bit more professional, where it sounds like our client. It isn't that stodgy resume language. It still doesn't have to include the personal pronouns, or maybe sometimes it does, depending on your client and their target audience. But it isn't that overused language that we're tired of seeing in resumes, and people are tired of seeing and reading in resumes. It's our client's actual language and how we can help them tell the story in their language, while of course still mixing in the keywords that we need to both have the online optimization in a LinkedIn profile and the keyword density that we need in a resume to make it through those applicant tracking systems. So those are some of the challenges that we've been facing. They're evolving, they're moving us forward, and they really are challenging us to become better storytellers, to become more comfortable speaking in our client's language, and really be a ghostwriter instead of a resume writer or LinkedIn profile writer, where you're telling that story in that client's language so that it's their unique brand. As William Maruda says, their unique value of promise, their unique promise of value, their unique promise of value, not yours or the stodgy resume language that we're used to using. So in personal branding, those are some of the trends. We're more authentic, we're more transparent. We are mixing our personal and professional life to have that connection with our decision makers, and we're communicating through story while also still keeping it short and sweet and to the point, and in any way that we can, making it visual or video to accommodate the human brain's shift away from being able to read long blocks of text. Next one, around career management, advancement, and longevity. How do we manage our careers? How do we make sure that we're going to have a career and a job 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when we know that so much is changing in everything that we are doing? Career longevity, this is a statement that kind of came out of the 2017 and 2016 career trends reports, that our career stability really depends on our adaptability, our ability to move. And then in 2017, really added that consistency bit. And it seems like a little bit of juxtaposition here, that it's our adaptability, our ability to move from industry to industry perhaps, and definitely job to job, be able to communicate the skills that we have into that new industry's language or new employer's language. But then it's also important that we know what is consistent about us. And this goes back to that personal branding bit. We're going to be changing so frequently that we don't want to lose our identity. We're going to be changing so frequently that we need to know how to translate what we've done before in the past so that we bring that value with us to the future. So as people are changing, and they're changing faster in terms of what they're doing, if they lose the ability to sell their experience, if they lose their ability to promote how they've added value in the past, they're going to constantly be searching for and competing for entry-level jobs, or competing against people who are able to do this and they're not. And if they're not able to communicate their experience and the value in a really specific and concrete way, they're wishy-washy. They're talking about their quote-unquote transferable skills, which are great, but all that tells me is that you haven't done what I'm asking you to do. And employers don't like that, right? We know that. So our ability to communicate that value, communicate that experience, and to move it forward, and not just adapt, but be able to also sell that consistency of our value as we do so, as we move. Those two pieces going together so that our clients don't lose their minds and get frustrated with having to quote unquote reinvent themselves all the time, but instead they're understanding how their self, their constant, valuable, consistent self, can add value in a new industry, and how they can communicate that as they move. Career identity is no longer for life. It's been true for a while, and people are still adjusting. People are trying to figure out how to pivot faster. How do I move when my industry goes away? How do I move when my industry dies? Because some of the global forces we'll talk about here in a minute. They're seeking more coaching or online classes, more resources to help them do this. It's something that most of us, most people, are not great at. How do you make that pivot? How do you make that move? They don't know. They're realizing that it's important. They're realizing that it's inevitable. And they're seeking out more resources to help them do that, again, through perhaps one-on-one coaching, and then the complete boom that we've seen in online classes, webinars. Just yesterday, Google said that they're launching online classes, free online classes for people and how to interview, etc. So this is creating a lot of opportunity for those of us in the careers industry. It's creating a lot of valuable resources for those who are having those issues. And it's also, of course, creating a lot of overwhelm and confusion. What do I need? What information is correct? What information applies to me? How do I put it all together? And then that work-life integration, people are really figuring out that they need a holistic approach to their career. They need to consider how their career and life go together, which is refreshing for those of us who've been doing this forever. Finally, people get it, right? That the two can't be separated, and they're looking for assistance in integrating the two and understanding how they can manage that work-life integration for their career success and for their life balance, if you will, in terms of how they stay happy and healthy throughout their life. A lot of work going on in that workplace happiness, workplace healthiness space that is helping people realize the importance of those two pieces and how they work together. Career advancement, it's been little by little dribbling in understanding of this in the wider world of job seekers and employees, that they are really in charge. So a lot of talk this year within our career thought leaders around entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, taking control of your career internally to a company, and then some of the other external things people are doing to be in charge of their career, their longevity, their ability to move when things happen. And the more that people can accept this and embrace this idea, the better off they're going to be in their career development. There are some wonderful things going on and in partnership in the external space of the internet, and also in the internal space of their company, that are helping people achieve this. And especially right now with the job market the way it is in the US at least, and improving, I think somewhat globally, that there are companies doing more to help our clients be in charge of their careers as well, because they have the resources and the need to do so. So emotional intelligence, we're seeing people upset with bias in the workplace, with harassment. Every day you read a new article about harassment and what's going on in the workplace. And we're really seeing this move beyond emotional intelligence as a conversation piece or as a soft skill, to really people talking about emotional intelligence in very real ways. Can you lead people that are different than you? Can you get in control of your bias so that you're not saying things that are hurtful to others, so that you're not saying things that are hurtful to yourself? We have more companies doing screening of social media for specific issues related to emotional intelligence. They're screening your social media accounts for the big 5 personality traits. They're screening your social media accounts for anger and some of the negative behaviors. They're trying to figure out how to do that without being discriminatory. But there's technology evolving and partnerships evolving between HR and technology to screen as much as they can for those issues, to be able to catch before they hire someone if they have anger issues or biases that will impact the hiring and leading of their team. It's a real issue that is impacting people's career advancement, not just in the kind of fluffy soft skills way, but in companies are really starting to figure out how to ask questions and screen for this when they hire. And then our individuals are feeling the real impact of a lack of emotional intelligence, or the benefits of a good, positive emotional intelligence, as that gets more valued by their employers. Our coaches are coaching people in their emotional intelligence. They're helping people discover their blind spots, and again, creating some opportunity there for the coaching profession. Companies are offering more development programs to increase retention. So if your client is wanting to take control of their career and be part of that free agent nation that we were just looking at, they actually now have more opportunities within their company to do development. This is one of the areas where our clients need help figuring out how to integrate this into their work world. We're so busy, we're so head down, we're getting our work done, and we may not take opportunities for this. We may not know how to ask our boss for these opportunities, or for time off or money to do these things. And yet we're seeing more and more companies offer great opportunities. And this is the time for our clients to take that opportunity, because we know it won't last. Just like every other thing, there'll be another economic decline and companies will stop doing this. Now is the time for our clients to take the opportunity to do this. And even Walmart, what was that, a week ago or so, Walmart announcing their huge program for offering tuition reimbursement for their employees. Programs like that are popping up all around small companies, large companies, and part of our clients' challenge is to figure out how to take those opportunities when, of course, they have all of their work-life issues, real balance and challenges in their everyday work and life. Our next section is on that dynamic workplace, globalization, and how we work. So what work looks like every day and how this is shifting in the world of work. Jobs of the future. We see something almost every day about artificial intelligence and how many jobs artificial intelligence is going to take. And our brains, all of us, are naturally set up to pay more attention to the negative than the positive. So there's almost just as many articles about how artificial intelligence will create new jobs, artificial intelligence will create opportunities, but you may find, like I do, that that's not what your clients are paying attention to. They're scared. They're scared about where the work is going, about how their future is going to look, about the war for talent or the lack of jobs, just whatever they're consuming about this idea of the jobs of the future. Fear can somewhat be a little bit of a good thing, right? We can help them research, pay attention, and know what's going to go on in the future. And that fear can be paralyzing. It can be a very negative force in our lives and our clients' lives. So it's important to stay up on what's going on in the research and the predictions about the jobs of the future. And we have to know how it really affects us. The difference between how things are moving and growth is so different from one industry to the next, from one geography to the next. It's not a single solution or a single prediction for any one type of person. Our job is to help them know what it looks like in their industry, what it looks like in their geography or their target geography. It's so varied, even across the US and let alone across the globe, in terms of how things are changing. The pace and how work gets done is increasing globally, although different in some places than others. And of course, there are certain types of jobs that are going to be more in demand and rising in demand depending on where you are in the country. So in the US, a lot of our teams were sharing about the rise of technology and STEM in terms of blockchain and AI and virtual reality. Across the globe, people are talking about the increase in healthcare, health services, as our aging population ages globally. In fact, more so in some places than in the US. And what that will mean globally in terms of the opportunities in healthcare and health services. And then those hands-on skills, especially in the US, but also talking about that in the UK in terms of the rise of apprenticeships and some of the other jobs of the future that may not be what we think of, that may actually be counterintuitive to all this talk about technology. So getting underneath it, getting to the real and talking through with our clients about what it really means for them, instead of just paying attention to the big headlines, the big data, the big trends that may or may not always impact exactly what they do. We need to be aware of them, be aware of how they may impact what we're doing, and not stick our head in the sand, but definitely not let that fear drive their decisions because things change very quickly. There's also predictions that programmers will be obsolete in 10 years or 15 years because of the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will learn how to program without programmers. So it all depends on what you read and where your thoughts are, and we can help our clients pick through that information. Globalization of careers, one of the wonderful things about getting people together all the way across the world is that we get to learn about what's going on in all of these other areas of the world. So our folks in the UK, France, and Spain talking about all of the economic shifts. Obviously we see those somewhat here in the US in terms of our still recovering from the Great Recession, but in the UK you have Brexit, you have that impacting actually the whole European Union in kind of an unknown way right now. You have in Spain companies moving between the regions and a lot of an economic unrest or political unrest there that is causing changes. And some good news, our folks from Spain were talking about the unemployment being down, which is great, and yet all of these shifts in economic unrest. And then, of course, more recently, a lot of the trade changes between the US and a lot of other countries causing differences in how people's industries are growing or shrinking or doing, maybe short term, maybe long term. And then a lot of changes in immigration policy across the world, not just in the US, but a lot of changes in immigration policy around the world impacting that workforce and how they engage in their work. So how we work, of course, this is part of our career management, but also part of how we work being different. Those side gigs are becoming the norm, not the exception. And people are seeking out side gigs for all different types of reasons. It is, yes, to make some additional money. And perhaps this is more prevalent and has been around longer in some cultures around the world than in other industrialized countries where people were used to having that one job, 9 to 5, right? And that's changing. It's not that prevalent anymore to just have one job. Most people are figuring out how to do a side gig, and that may mean that they're doing that to get skills, they're getting it to do money, they're getting it to pursue a passion outside of work. They're figuring out all different ways and reasons to bring that external piece of an additional job into their work. Some of the predictions talk about how this might lead to more entrepreneurship. Data doesn't really support that that's happening yet, but a lot of people want it to happen. There's a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs, especially millennials. 62% of millennials want to be entrepreneurs. They don't necessarily, I think, have the stability or the money or the skills perhaps yet to launch that entrepreneurship, but we may see more of a boom in entrepreneurship as those forces come together and allow people to do that. And of course, that means for us as career professionals, we need to have those resources. How do you help someone find a side gig or start a side gig or do a side gig while they're working and not lose their job? John O'Connor did a great spot on the Career Confidant radio with me about that. How do you get a side gig or start a side gig and not lose your job? How we coach people through those decisions and transitions is something we may not be used to. Some of us may be in our own business and be a little bit more used to those conversations, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have the resources to coach others in how to put the pieces together, that portfolio, career, side gigs, whatever you want to call it, and how to build the resources they need to start out an entrepreneurial venture if they want to. Again, in how we work, 40% of people are doing remote work, 43% in the latest research, and that's growing. And that doesn't mean that people are necessarily doing their own thing, but they are working remotely from home for their company, either part-time or full-time. Just saw an article today that they were doing a study that showed it was best to work from home for 3 days a week. What's the optimal percentage of working remotely? Some companies insourced people. They brought people back in and didn't want them working remotely, but we still have 43% of folks who are working remotely, and that trend is poised to keep growing. Yeah, great question. How will employers measure the accountability of employees working from home? Lots of companies have been doing it for a long time, I guess similar to in terms of what they would do for people at work, and what is their end results, what are their end products, and are they getting done what they need to get done? Not as much in terms of time clock as it is in terms of output, which a lot of HR conversations would say is what people want and what actually may be more healthy for a work environment, to judge people on their end products and their results and not necessarily on a time clock that they're punching in. Our last piece here then around talent management, hiring, screening, and onboarding. Remember that most of that information is coming from the career services side. So this is the employee's experience of these functions and a little bit from those hiring managers that participate in our events and share their thoughts as well. So salary negotiation, career professionals report that more candidates are doing it or wanting to do it, and hiring managers are expecting it. This is becoming, more of a common occurrence, both in employee-employer conversations, so promotions, advancement, increasing salary as an employee, and in job search, job interviews. There's more salary negotiation going on, and more of it is expected to be happening. And there was a time, especially in the US at the depth of the recession, when candidates didn't feel like they could, and maybe hiring managers didn't feel like they had to, and that has flipped. We are squarely on the side of folks doing this. Some of the research around salary, and of course there are municipalities and organizations who have banned asking about previous salary to try to get rid of some of the salary differential between minorities and between women and white men. This is part of the pie, right? This is our clients' responsibility within that whole process, is to make sure that they are comfortable having a salary conversation and that they know how to do it. We can only put so much of the onus on the employer to make those salaries level, I guess, if you will. Part of it too is our clients, and especially those clients who tend not to negotiate, are women and sometimes minorities, to make sure that they have the skills and the comfort level they need to go in and negotiate that salary for themselves. Hiring process and the candidate experience. Our data on the interviewing, again, this is coming mostly from our career services professionals. They're seeing people have up to 10 rounds of interviews. So the interviewing process has just gotten longer and longer and longer, and there's some really old data on that. I didn't want to put it in here because it is quite old. It's been increasing since 2010. In 2017, again, the reports from our attendees, our career thought leaders, really being around this process is still lengthening. Multiple rounds of interviews, up to, as I said, double digits rounds of interviews, and that process is getting more grueling for the candidate. There is also more video interviews going on, of course, which could speed up the process for folks. Sometimes those videos are received well by our clients, sometimes they're not, depends on how they're done. We have the asynchronous videos going on where the client records a video without any people on the other side there, and then it's scored, and our clients are struggling somewhat with that technology and with the candidate experience of that technology. It feels cold to them, it feels maybe even demoralizing, and helping them understand why the employers are doing that, how they're trying to get more face time with their candidates, with our candidate. They are trying to use technology to the benefit of everyone. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that on the candidate side. And then, of course, more presentations, more and more presentations being required for all different types of positions in organizations. And some career services professionals relating that their candidates are being required to create a presentation that really doesn't have anything even to do with the job. So do a presentation about your favorite interest or something, which is an interesting change. But I think you'll see more video interviews, more presentations, both via video and live, and then, of course, just a longer process. All of this still happening in the face of data that the talent management folks are doing that says candidates really need a better experience, and candidates are leaving your company hiring process because they're not having a good experience. Companies don't seem to be taking that to heart yet. That, Career Crossroads does some great research around the candidate experience and how many candidates companies lose because their application is too long or their interview process is too long, or all of the factors. And yet the companies really don't seem to be responding to that yet in terms of changing their hiring process. Hiring and discrimination. So, there's a lot of work being done in the HR space to reduce bias in their hiring. trying to reduce bias by training their managers, training their HR folks. They're also trying to reduce bias through technology. So blind hiring can be done in many different ways. Can be done through the applicant tracking system, where it removes the name and perhaps even the company names and sometimes even the university names off of a resume. All of those things that could add to people's bias in terms of, maybe this person is Ivy League or not, or they're trying to take away as much of that bias as possible, because most of it doesn't have any credible data behind it. So there's nothing that says hiring someone from Ivy League has a better outcome. So they're trying to take away all those biases that we can in the technology space, some of that with resumes, and then some of it coming into the video interviewing. So interesting technology that's taking hold in some companies around a blind video interviews, where it augments your voice. You can do a telephone interview where it augments the person's voice, so you can't tell if they're female or male or young or old or accent. So they're doing both video and telephone interviews that are augmented so that the bias can be removed, both around gender, ethnicity, where you're from. They're trying to reduce some of those biases throughout the process. So interesting things that are happening. Be aware of how we might help our clients navigate some of those processes that it might happen, and not to be afraid of it. And that we'll see what the effectiveness is. There's lots of research going on is this actually effective? Does it decrease bias? Because of course at some point they're going to have a face-to-face interview, and how will they handle the bias there? Hiring assessment and gamification. So another increase that's happening in terms of employers using more and looking for more assessments to use in the hiring process. Some of this goes right into that bias conversation. If we want to be less biased, can we use an assessment that may strip out that bias for us and just let us pick the person that scores the highest on this assessment, or pick the person who is the best fit for the job based on that assessment? That assessment piece is usually fairly intimidating to our clients. What are the right answers? What are they looking for? It was so weird. Those personality types of assessments, there's DISC types of assessments that are set up to measure, will someone be successful in the job or not based on the profile. That process can be very intimidating for our clients. The other piece to know is that some of the companies are using that not only as a hiring assessment to do selection, but also as kind of a placement assessment for, are you high potential or not? Very interesting. That was shared by some of our thought leaders. I don't know all the details there, but some companies are thinking about, not only can we use this assessment to hire, but to identify if someone will be a high potential or not. Gamification in hiring also growing. This is where someone like Facebook might, instead of interviewing, have someone do a problem, create a product, write a program. It may be kind of a work project, or it may be a game where they play a scenario of something that typically happens in the job, and the way that they navigate that game, similar to a video game, determines if they're selected for an interview or perhaps even selected for the position. A lot of gamification going on in the training and development world that has just recently spilled over into the hiring world. How can we apply that same principle that we can almost do what our candidates wanted, right? What I hear candidates asking all the time, could they just hire me and see how it goes? They're using gamification as a way to do that as closely as they can. Put you in the scenario, you perform, we watch how you perform in the game, and most of it's automated, it's scored automated, and then hire you based on that game. It can leave out folks that are unfamiliar with technology or intimidated by technology, whether that be because of age, because of socioeconomic status. So for our folks who are going into industries where this is more prevalent, typically technology-based jobs or technology-based companies, and then some of your consulting type companies like Deloitte and those, they might be using gamification more than other types of companies. And if we have someone who's reticent with technology, definitely an opportunity for them to get some training or do some online work before they go to that interview where they might have to do some gamification work. Some folks do gamification in an analog way, if you will. In fact, years ago, I worked with a woman who worked at REI, and she would do this with a group interview where she'd have a group of people there who were there to interview for the job, and she'd give them a scenario related to the store. Some of them were customers, some of them were customer service people, and she'd give them a game in person. So gamification doesn't necessarily have to mean technology, but most of the time that's where it's headed. Candidate requirements. I saw someone post on one of our thought leader forums recently about the shift towards going back to, if someone has a pulse, we'll hire them. I'd have to say that that wasn't the overarching theme here, but definitely that companies are starting to move away from holding out for that purple squirrel, and purple squirrel kind of being the HR or recruiter word for having exactly all of these very diverse and impossible requirements, right? Looking for that impossible candidate. HR folks are moving away from that. They're slowly moving away from that and willing to give a little bit when they hire. And they're also loosening the reins on whether or not they want a degree. And we're seeing a lot of talk about this in the industry right now. You know, people don't need a degree. Look at all these programmers that are just leaving college and going straight to jobs. I don't know about some of you, but I've worked with a lot of people, especially in 2009, 2010, who were told that same thing when they were graduating high school, and then 40 years later struggling to find work because they didn't have a degree. So I'm a little hesitant to tell folks that they don't need a degree. It's nice that they're loosening the reins on a 4-year degree, because of course there's a lot of opportunity beyond that for someone to have additional education, trade school, community college, associate's degree, specific training for their field. So that piece of it is nice, but I'm hesitant to tell people that they should just go from college to the workforce because they don't need a degree right now, or don't need a trade school degree, don't need any additional training. And because in the world of history, we know that history will repeat itself, and I don't want them 40 years from now realizing that they're unemployable almost because they don't have that degree when the economy shifts. And that may happen faster than 20, 40 years from now. So helping them really figure out where are they headed and what do they need and what can they get along the way. It doesn't necessarily mean they need a 4-year degree right now. What can they get along the way? What are the signs that they can pay attention to? And how can they be a lifelong learner so that they stay engaged in learning and don't have that freak out moment 40 years from now when they figure out they need a degree, because they've been paying attention to the market they want to participate in, and know what those requirements are and how they're shifting. So it may mean that they have less educational requirements right now, which is great. They could get started, they could enter their career, but then how do we help them pay attention and stay connected and value that lifelong learning so that they aren't stuck later in their career? So we hope that you'll join us. We have a lot of events coming up. We have a lot of programs and shorter sessions, like our educational mastery sessions are 90 minutes. We do our career jam every year. This next year it will be Friday, November 30th, and you can participate in designing these trends and putting these trends together and telling us what they are so that we can be sharing the information that is most relevant and current across the globe. We'd love to have you participate with us in our events, in that career jam, which again will be November 30th, and then our annual get-together conference we do once a year in person, and in 2019 it will be in San Diego, California on Shelter Island. We'd love to have you there as well. Any way you want to connect with us, a lot of you are already in our LinkedIn group, where we talk and we share, and we always look forward to your participation there, your questions, your input in any way. You can always connect with me through our website, careerthoughtleaders.com. I'm Marie, Marie, at careerthoughtleaders.com. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you as you move forward and experience these trends and use this information to help your job seekers or your leadership developers, career advancers, and entrepreneurs, all of those folks who need help managing their career for the long term.